find the Q&A in the corner of your screen. And of course, any questions you get along the way, let me know. I'm James Fletcher. I am the CEO and a Marketo Solutions Architect here at JTF Marketing. And I will be taking you through this presentation today, focused on content, specifically around engagement programs. So today we're going to cover off managing your existing content and identifying the content gaps. We're going to also focus on boosting conversions through engagement programs, and importantly, looking at some clever CTAs. We'll also give you some tech tips for controlling content's distribution and availability as we go through this as well. As I say, any questions you get as we go through, feel free to throw them into the chat or the Q&A. To let you know, this session is being recorded and we will share it after this webinar is complete. So anybody who can't join can definitely catch up later, or if you can only stay for a short while, we will definitely share that out to you later on. So JTF Marketing has been around for about 7 years. We support a range of customers and a range of industries using Marketo Engage. We specialize in Marketo Engage, the platform as a whole, importantly, the integration points, and of course, the education of willing victims who are using Marketo Engage, who want to know how to get the most from the platform. So you might see some familiar logos up there on the screen. And of course, there's many more that don't appear here as well. So this webinar this webinar series even, we've been running through nurture campaigns, engagement programs in Marketo over the last couple of weeks. If you haven't seen the first two of this 5-part series, please do go back and watch it. It's the design and objective piece around getting it right. How do you structure it? How do you make sure that you've got enough information before you start? The data selection piece around how do we build the rules to think not only about inclusion, but also exclusion. And then importantly, today, we're going to cover the content piece. So how do I get the content right for my engagement programs? What does it look like? How do I build it so that it's scalable? Of course, the next two will come up to building and testing and reporting and optimizing, which is just as important as getting the planning piece correct up at the beginning. So you'll have seen we've talked a lot about revenue cycle models over the last couple of webinars, and you'll find that even in our resource library on our website, we talk often about revenue cycle models. Now, there's an important part to this. We all talk about getting to revenue marketing, always on marketing, displaying or showing the impact of marketing on revenue. And this is how we do it in Marketo. We've got to have this core foundation in place, which is a revenue cycle model, which will map the users through the customer journey. Now, as we've gone through the design and the data phases, we've talked often about these different steps, right? So how do we get the data right? How do we make sure that it's scalable? How do we make sure that as people are moving through, we've got a specific message for them as they're going through that journey? And we've kind of built this in this structure of a Visio. So a Visio, Lucid chart, whatever your favorite is, or even a piece of paper or a whiteboard, drawing it out and really getting the detail down. Again, we're building this up over time, right? So what I'm trying to do is take you on this journey of building a best practice engagement program. Of course, you have to add the context and color of your business to make sure that is what you've got available. Now, you'll see on the screen here, we've got the objective, of course, running along the top. We've now got our transition rules from the data perspective. We've now got to get into the next phase, which is content CTA. Now, before we jump straight into grabbing all the content, building it and throwing it into all the different streams, the important part here is to look at what are the objectives that we're trying to line up to. So again, we talked about that last time. So we're trying to validate people's records. We're trying to drive engagement. We're trying to start conversations. Again, we've got those all noted along the top of our framework here. The next thing is now this content CTA. So what is it that we are expecting someone to do with the content that we're sending them? So if we start on the left-hand side here, we've got opt-in and selection of preferences. We've then got validating the email address if we haven't already in the previous stage. We're trying to collect minimum data points. So again, the CTA of the content needs to be focused around data collection, not only engagement. And then we've also got to look at, engagement, booking a call, starting a conversation, which is the most important part of this lead process. So again, as we start to work our way through that, we can, look at the different options for engaging. What does the content align to, and how do we respin existing content to make sure that it's accurate? So as we go into that and we start thinking about mapping out this content and the gap analysis, it's very familiar ground for a lot of us, especially in this marketing operations space, where we just grab content, build some emails and get the emails out the door without thinking too much about what have we got? Is this the best content we've got? Is there something else that is valid for this campaign, or should we create something new? And often when we talk about nurture programs, there's this kind of daunting pressure of we've got to build lots of content in order to get this campaign out the door. But actually, I'm here to tell you some good news, which is you don't. You can probably reuse similar pieces time and time again by respinning them, reworking them, and flexing the CTA. Now, the first piece of this is actually a very tedious piece of work, which is collecting your content into a content mapping spreadsheet. Now, there's a link here on this slide, which you'll get after the webinar, which will take you to a template that we use, and you'll be able to engage with that and use that. And again, this structure is pretty straightforward. We're just trying to get, what is the title of the piece? When was it created or last updated? What is the URL? What kind of content is it? Because we're going to map that to the different stages of the engagement program. And then when we get into topics, that's really interesting, right? What are we actually wanting to say with this piece of content? Where does it fit in our journey? So let's say, it's top of the funnel awareness content, so it's informational, or maybe it's further down the funnel and this, specific webinar that's on demand is focused on, starting a conversation or getting people to try out your product. Again, what is that main topic that we're driving towards? Again, you might choose to enrich this with any other data points that you feel are necessary. Maybe you want to get into length of video or number of words or, author, whatever it might be. Again, how you're going to measure the effectiveness of your content is absolutely up to you. So again, grab all that content, get it into a simple structure, get it in place. Majority of it's going to be public. So the URL might be a web page, it might be a video link, it might be a PDF that's stored in Marketo, whatever it's going to be. Again, collect it together, get it in this format. Now, a lot of people start with this and then kind of let it drift. The important part is keeping it up to date as we go. And you may choose to include or exclude content from it. My recommendation is if you exclude anything, move it to a second tab in the same format, just in case you get light on content later on in the process. The next piece, which is slightly more complicated, is going back to what we talked about earlier. So if I flick back to our earlier slide, we've got these different streams in our engagement program that we want to populate with content, and they've got to line up to those CTAs. So let's take an example here where, let's say we've got a video. The video is a customer case study. Where does that fit in the funnel? Typically, it's mid to lower end of the funnel, but it can also be used at the top of the funnel, right? Depending on the messaging that you're sending, depending on the content that you're sending out. And you guys are best placed for deciding what content works for you in your engagement streams, because you know your business well enough and the journey that your customer is going to go on. When it comes to the CTA piece, this is when we start using multiple pieces of content, right? So top of the funnel, we're just looking to acquire names. We're starting to get some of the engagement maybe. Middle of the funnel, we're starting to think about how can we profile this person? How can we collect the missing data points? And then from a lower end of the funnel, we're trying to reinforce, right? So we talk about this a lot, the different spins on a piece of content. So if we take that case study video, for example, up the top end of the funnel, we're going to be using it as a reinforcement of the solution content that we're going to be selling to it in order to draw our customers in, right? Look at so-and-so who's done this with our product. Click here to go and watch more and build more engagement, etc. And if you use something like 23 or Vidyard, you can actually add cards to collect some names, some form fill outs, etc. So again, think about that in this scenario as well. Again, how do you get people to engage and show that they're engaging? From a middle of the funnel perspective, again, we're just trying to drive engagement, trying to drive lead score in order to prioritize for sales to pick up. And then when we get down to the further end of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, we're actually trying to do one-to-one communications, right? So it's, hey, Bob, I'm sending you this video because I think it's going to be of interest based on what we've been talking about or based on our conversation. So again, they're going to come as one-to-one personal emails from Marketo, automated, of course, throwing some content and keeping that pulse, especially where you have longer sales cycles, it can be pretty important. So identifying the gaps. Now, the power of this spreadsheet and almost ticking the boxes to say, well, do I have a piece of content that fits there or not, will start to give you a mapping of what you've got, right? I mean, the wonders of engagement programs in Marketo is that you're able to start with one piece of content per stream. It doesn't mean that it's just one piece and that's where you park it. It means that you can get started. Depending on your cadence, that will then decide how fast you need to produce more content. We'll touch on that when we get into the build phase, right? So in the next webinar, we'll start to talk about cadences and how frequently should we communicate to our customers. As a kind of best practice, you should aim to have between 3 to 5 pieces of content per stage. And again, you're looking at a mix of content styles and a mix of content hooks in order to get someone engaged. And it might be that you're taking, a call to action for book a demo or book a call back or speak to one of our experts right up the top of the funnel in order to accelerate people through also. Don't be scared to do that, but make sure that it's not the first email that goes out, right? Because obviously you send out an email straight away saying, hey, come and book a call with us, you're probably going to get an unsubscribe. Whereas you've got to warm them up a little bit and give them a little bit of love, first of all, a little bit of value exchange. Again, stay focused here on the CTA. What is it you need? Is it a spin on an existing asset? Is it a case of looking at something in a slightly different lens in order to get engagement from it? And again, I always talk about this difference between if you've got someone who you're trying to collect data points from and you already know who they are, don't ask them to fill out a form. Please don't ask them to fill out a form. You can get smarter, and we'll talk about that in a second in terms of how do you get people to engage and fill out a form, inverted commas, without actually filling out the form. And we'll cover that, as I say, in the next piece of this presentation. The most important part here is to rework and respin existing content. And sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes you're going to take a step back, got to get other eyes, fresh eyes on the pieces of content and say, well, actually, that could work for middle of the funnel if you said this, or if you present it in this way. So definitely think about that from a content perspective, and how can you scale this? How do you make sure that it's workable without having to wait 6 months for new content? If you're lucky enough to have a big content team, that is. So when we talk about content types, I thought it was useful to share this from the Content Marketing Institute. Now, everybody kind of gets into this kind of framework of AIDA. We've talked about this in the design phase as well, of all these content methodologies. This is top of the funnel, this is bottom of the funnel. As we know, the buyer cycle has changed. Everybody's looking for information, point in time information. Even yourselves, you may have found this webinar through looking for solutions of engagement programs for Marketo. And importantly, again, we've got to remember that this content will serve the purpose through everything. Now, I always use this example of webinars being actually very valuable throughout the entire life cycle of a customer, not just about acquiring, not just about engaging them, but actually also during the life cycle of a customer. It's very difficult to maintain conversation all the time. We all know that, especially as our customer bases expand. We've got to then keep a pulse, keep retention up by engaging them with relevant content. And it might be that you automatically think, well, this webinar is specifically focused to acquisition, but actually can also be useful, replayed, maybe it's on demand for existing customers. So again, think about how you can slice and dice that content in order to serve your audience. It might be you take a webinar and you split it up into 5-minute videos, which you then use on social media. or to engage via one-to-one sales or account manager engagement. Again, use this table to almost take the data that Content Marketing Institute have found and map in the content that you've got or haven't got. So think about what content you need to produce that will help you sell your message. When I think about the engagement programs that we build, I'm often thinking about identifying that audience up front, qualifying in or out based on behavior, and then starting to get into the solution elements of the product or service straight away, right? What are you offering me? How are you offering it? What information or assets do you have that supports me in finding out more about what you can do for me in order to push me through that buying cycle? So again, take that into consideration as you're building out your content library and identifying the gaps. And often you might look at this list and go, well, actually, we've got loads on that. We've got lots of blog articles. We've got lots of information. And I'm going to talk to those now in terms of how do we use those within the engagement programs and what structure should they look like? It's probably the number one question we get asked all the time. Well, how much content do I need? And what should it look like? Give me an example of something in Marketo so that I can get a gauge for how much email copy I need to write. And there's no winning answer, right? I mean, we find some customers are super successful with plain text emails because their audience is more familiar with a one-to-one approach versus maybe someone who works in marketing who's looking for something a little bit glossier, more exciting than just a plain text email. But again, you're probably all sitting there going, well, actually, I quite like a plain text email. It keeps it to the point. And again, we're going to play the balance of content here. It's not just about glossy email templates. It has to be about sophistication, a little bit of complexity as well, and behavior. So I'm going to take you through now a couple of examples of content layouts. These are just wireframes, by the way, so don't get too excited. They're not very visual or exciting, but it will hopefully feed you some ideas on how do you present your content? What should it look like? What are the layouts that I should be using in Marketo in order to get more results? And we'll talk about specific use cases as well. So let's kick it straight off with blogs and articles, because it's probably the main thing that we're often sending to our customers. And it might even be a web page, right? You might be building a services page focused on, email templates, for example. Therefore, we're going to send you to a place where you can read more about email templates. And that topic might shift time and time again. It might be about heat mapping in Marketo, or it might be about modular templates or landing page sections or whatever it might be. It might even be related to something outside of the base service that you're offering that you're driving people towards in order to engage. And again, what we're looking for here is pure engagement, right? So we're looking for people to click, read more, discover more, etc. And again, play with the text to find out what button text works best for you, or ask one of our consultants, of course. When it comes to videos and webinars, again, I think we're all in the world of GIFs these days, of putting up GIFs of the video so that it looks like it's playing in your email browser. And again, engaging that user, catching their eye as they're flicking through their inbox. I think for me, the important part is how do you supplement that video with more information, either on the landing page itself, or also looking at additional supplemental content that you feel might be valuable for that person as they're engaging with that content. So maybe it's a white paper, maybe it's an additional video, maybe it's industry specifics, whatever it might be. Again, add those into your email structure in order to get a better view of how not only your customers interacting with that content, but giving them more opportunities to engage as well. When we start talking about case studies and white papers, often a lot of people like to get into quite a broad range of these, not just necessarily looking at one of them, but actually starting to look at multiple case studies at once. So I recommend always trying to serve up a couple at a time, not overwhelming the user. Again, you can try and make them feel like they're embedded in a normal email so that the person can go through and engage. There might be videos, there might be text, whatever it might be. For the interactive and behavioral pieces, again, for me, these are, we're looking for people to engage, purely just to click on stuff, purely to tell us or give us a signal that they're maybe interested in a specific product or a specific industry, which will allow us to then filter them. And this is really helpful at the top of the funnel, right? When you're still figuring out the person, you're still trying to understand what services that might they be interested in from your business, or which products are of interest to them most. Again, getting them to click on stuff in the email, we can then weight the content from there in order to then get them to engage further. Let's say it's choosing an industry. You get them to choose an industry here. If they have more clicks in one industry, you start to send them content specific to that. Again, it's about being smart in the way we engage with this content. Downloads, again, are an interesting one. We talk about these in many different styles. Often you'll see this format on the left-hand side. You'll have a thumbnail of the document itself, and then maybe you'll have some descriptions and bullet points of what you're going to get from that document, and a big fat download button. Again, the key here is to be clever about this, using the call to action to engage the person, or even using it as supporting content, right? How do you get people engaged in that content, or downloading the piece of content if you're looking to acquire data points? The final one, which I really love, and it comes up time and time again, is one-to-one fake forwards, right? So again, looks like it's coming from a salesperson, looks like it's coming from an individual, but ultimately you're trying to get them to engage or start a conversation with that person. Now, you may want to use something like Chili Piper embedded in your emails to book a call so that you get some feedback, or something like Lead Gnome in order to drive responses back from the campaign itself, so that the salesperson isn't filtering out of offices, or they're only dealing with the human replies. And again, you can start to measure the results of the campaign that way as well. So I'm conscious of the time, and apologies for the start. Again, tips on content builds. There's something really important here when we start building in Marketo. And again, I'm going to spend more time on this in the next webinar. You can mix up the content embedded in your engagement programs. It's not just about email builds like you see here. It is also about embedding default programs, event campaigns, etc., etc. So please do use a mix of them. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Embedded programs allow you greater control and greater segmentation over the audience than just the single email. Of course, the single email, you can use dynamic content, you can use velocity scripting for personalization, which will give you some level of granularity. But if you pull that out into a program, you can start to filter people who've already engaged with that content before. Maybe it's a download, or people who have a different job title or different seniority. Therefore, how do you serve them up different content that's better aligned to them and their persona? I think also you get a better sense of return on investment from a piece of content when it's in an embedded program. You can track, how much it costs you to create a white paper, how many people have engaged with it, what should we do with them now? If they haven't engaged, how do we optimize again, etc., etc. I think you can also use a bit more capability here around trigger and flow steps. So it's not just about sending an email. It might be about following up, reminders, interesting moments, etc. When you're just throwing an email into a stream, of course, you've not got that capability unless you build it within the program as well. But it's not very usable again, right? You've got a local asset, local to your engagement program, versus a global asset that you can keep reusing. And again, we'll touch on more of that. My favorite approach, if you do want to build local email assets, is the mixed approach. So using both in order to make sure that you cover everything off. So how can we help you? I think there's a couple of key parts here. When it comes to content, the mapping out piece, of course, we can fill in a spreadsheet for you if you like, but you know which content you've got. We can help identify gaps and themes of content that you might want to add into your nurture campaign. We can also help you optimize that existing content. Often, seeing the woods for the trees can be quite difficult when you're under pressure to deliver. We can obviously help you with the technical structure in Marketo as well, and importantly, get you to that point where you're ready and you're comfortable with the technology in terms of an ongoing optimization. The important part here is giving you the confidence to work with engagement programs in Marketo. They're not very easy. They can be a little bit tricky and a little bit fiddly, and there's a few gotchas, and we're here to help you get that done. So definitely reach out if you're thinking about building a lead engagement program, or an engagement program, or a lead nurturing program, however many words we want to use to explain what it is. again, feel free to talk to us, get our opinion of what's good and what's bad, what not to do, what to do. And of course, watch the series of webinars to help you as well. So now to jump into some questions.